one of the sayings I like to use at Fleet Feet is fail fast, fail forward. Hopefully you fail frugally along the way. I mean, we live in an age right now where you think of like AI and sort of like the pace of sort of like change, or even like the evolution of the experience. I mean, when people go and they shop at Whole Foods or Amazon, like they're judging us, right? And so like, how do we continue to elevate our experience? Innovation happens through failure, and so you have to embrace that failure.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a conversation with the man you just heard from, Joey Pointer, who is the CEO of Fleet Feet. Fleet Feet is one of, if not the biggest kind of running store shoe chains in the entire country. They've got over 300 plus locations all throughout the country. I personally have been into many of them. It seems that anytime I go to a new city and need a running store to go to, there's always a Fleet Feet right by. And Joey dives into that model today. He dives into the success of Fleet Feet and the ways that he has tried to carry on the torch and add on in many new ways, including talking about helping to acquire the Foot Locker Cross Country National Championship meet in relation and partnership with Brooks to turn it into the Brooks Cross Country Championship meet, and a lot of other things. We talk about Joey's story, how he got brought into the running world, how he got brought into Fleet Feet, which he's been working at since 2004. If you're entrepreneurial or you're curious about people who have roles and jobs in the sport that aren't professional runners, this one is up your alley and right for you. And Joey comes packed and ready to display so much wisdom, so many insights from running a successful company like Fleet Feet. So without further ado, I hope you all enjoy this conversation with the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Joey Pointer. Joey Pointer, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Dominic. I am thrilled to be on your podcast today.
I want to shout out our good friend, Coach Chris Miltenberg, for setting this up. I would assume there's some UNC bias with where you live, close to Chapel Hill, but that whole, I think they call it the triangle, Wake Forest, NC State, UNC, doesn't have to be running. Who are you cheering for most of these days?
Anybody but Duke, but I am Tar Heel born and bred. As long as you don't have a Duke shirt or a Duke hat on, we're all good. But other than that, anybody but Duke. But Chris Miltenberg, I think the world of him, what he's done at UNC, some of the athletes, just incredible to watch and be a part of that journey.
I'm assuming you went to UNC then, or you're just close to the proximity to the school?
I did undergrad and grad school at UNC, and then met my wife there. I think she probably has 5 degrees at UNC, so we have spent a lot of money paying for UNC paraphernalia over the years.
I love it. Okay, so it makes sense. I have to ask, I know this is a running podcast, but if you follow football at all, how do you feel about the Belichick situation? And will UNC ever rise to the top in football or not quite?
Oh, I feel like this is a bad answer, but my truthful answer is everybody loves a good train wreck, and I just feel like this is a great train wreck that you get to watch, at some moment in time. So I appreciate the move. I think it's a bold hire. I mean, UNC hasn't been a great football school at any level, and so if you're going to go for the fences, and I feel like that's what they did. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and I'll leave it at that.
Obviously, living close to Chapel Hill, I did miss Duke in my response there. You did not pay me off to forget them in that list, but UNC, Duke, Wake Forest, NC State, all these schools have deep, rich histories in the running world, both on the grass and on the track. Do you feel like running Fleet Feet, running the stores, and that being kind of a collegiate sports and cross country and track and field is a big part of our sport? Do you feel like living close to those schools and kind of having a pulse on that culture helps you lead your company well and see some of the trends?
I would say so. I mean, I would say that not only at sort of like the collegiate level, you also have the Puma Elite team who's training here. And then we have some great sort of like high school distance programs. And so you sort of like have, I think they all kind of feed off of one another. And so for us to be able to watch what's happening at the collegiate level or sort of like the elite level, but then, downstream, I mean, like what are the high school kids, wanting at every level? I mean, even something as simple as like chicken legs is based here. And what high school kid doesn't want to just look wild, with a pair of chicken? I personally don't, but I think you can see innovation at multiple levels when you're looking for it. And so, as a retailer, that's what we want to do. We want to see sort of like the trends that are emerging, and how do we come alongside that and help support that.
I heard from Alex Osberg, one of Milt's esteemed athletes and a very close friend of mine and mentor. And he was my first ever podcast guest. He ran for Stanford, and then he was one of the first transfers with Milt to UNC. I want to say he did a grad program there, and now he's an assistant coach with Nike. He's told me the story of his dad, and I hope I'm getting this story right. But essentially, his dad, back in the day, saw an ad for a razor company or whatever, grooming men's company, and bought the product. And he still uses it to this day, 40 plus years later. And they've done, I think, similar studies and trends in regards to running shoes. No one forgets the first pair of spikes they bought. I certainly don't. Anyone I ask, they don't. And there's a big push and emphasis, I think, with running shoe stores specifically of like, how do you get high schoolers in the door? Because it's really easy with our phones to look up Nike.com or Hoka and just buy online. And so I'm curious from your perspective and background in the sport, as well as what Fleet Feet's trying to do. And we could talk about, acquiring Foot Locker nationals here, but or whatever angle you want to take it. But how much do you view that story of getting a freshman in the doors, and you might have them, they might go into Fleet Feet with their great grandkids when they're 80 one day, if you can get them in as freshmen?
I think that's where, a lot of our employees, our franchise owners, they started running, whether it was in middle school or high school. Those are your transformational years. That's where you just have so many great memories of just being a part of the team, right? And like running all the miles together. And I think for Fleet Feet, we're about building communities at all stages of your life. And so, I think early on, in those formative years, if we can come alongside that high school athlete, I'd even say like that middle school athlete, and be there. We do all sorts of spike nights. Being here with UNC, we have some great athletes that will just come out and talk to the kids about, hey, what's it like to be nervous before your race, or what are those race strategies like? And so to be a part of that community and to be a part of like that high school athlete's journey all the way through, I think is a special thing. It's important to us, and that's why we really wanted to be a part of the cross country championships, is to have like an iconic race to really have all of our stores anchor towards.
I think something really cool about Fleet Feet is there's almost one roughly close to anytime I go to a meet, and let me put it this way with Hoka and the shipment that Hoka was supposed to, send to the meet that was supposed to deck out me and my team in gear so that we're in uniform at the meet, and it doesn't come through because we have all sorts of shipping issues in the US, and they'll say, go to Fleet Feet, there's a Fleet Feet. And there's never not been a Fleet Feet in the city I've been in. I think that's something that's really cool about the company is if I'm talking to someone in California or talking to someone in Columbus or wherever it might be, there's generally a Fleet Feet within the area. How long has it taken to get it to that point where you guys are kind of a premier running shoe store across the US? I grew up in Toledo. There was like two options, and if I was talking to someone in California, they would have no clue what Dave's Running is. So for you, how proud are you of the fact that even a listener today, they can look up on Apple Maps Fleet Feet, and there's a pretty high percentage chance that they're not too far from one?
We always say we're a 50-year overnight success story. It's just mainly sleepless nights along the way. So June 1st, or this coming June 1st, will be our 50th anniversary. If you never heard the story, our founding is in California, so it's in Sacramento. Two women pioneers, Sally Edwards and Elizabeth Jansen. They opened that first store June 1st, 1976, and I guess for historical context, right? 49 years ago, women had just been allowed to run the Boston Marathon legally, in 1972, and so the fact that these two women wanted to open up a running store was pretty much unheard of at that moment in time. Old Victorian house, downtown Sacramento. You'd walk up the stairs to get fit. The shoes were in the basement. But it's about sort of like bringing people together and improving the lives through sort of like the power of running, and we've gradually sort of like grown over time. I don't think that there's been any one year where we're just like radically sort of like growing. It's just like stacking pennies, and pennies become nickels, and nickels become dimes, and dimes become dollars. And I would say it's been a pretty special and incredible journey that we've been on. We've been able to do it through a franchising model. I mean, that first store in downtown Sacramento, Sally and Elizabeth owned it. They opened up in Chico, California, which is 90 minutes to the north. And then they had inquiries, all across the country that were coming in. And so they quickly decided they wanted to franchise the concept. And, for us, like that franchise model allows us to have that neighborhood feel, right, where you feel connected to that local store, to that local owner, but allows us to have some level of scale. And when you do something long enough, eventually you reach that point. I still think that we have a long ways to go, but I would use the word humble. I mean, I don't know if I would use pride, but I am very humble, sort of like what we collectively, our team, has been able to build over the last 5 decades.
From my understanding, you joined the Fleet Feet team in 2004 as a financial manager. Your first day on the job, what do you remember about it? And if I was to come back to you that day in 2004 and say, hey, you're going to run the whole operation one day, 21 years later, what would you have thought in your head?
I don't know if I would have believed you. The first day. So I guess taking a step back, sort of my journey into Fleet Feet. I was working for Ernst Young, so I was doing tax consulting, CPA by background. My parents loved to say, "Oh, well, like my son works at one of the big four accounting firm and is a CPA." Like that was just a badge of, honor for them. I got married to my wife Ivy. Ivy is probably the much more avid runner of the two of us, always running marathons. She was going through medical school, and so she's spending all of this money at this local store, Fleet Feet Carborough. One day I was like, Ivy, we can't afford for your medical school, while like I'm the only one working, like you have literally got to get a job here so you can get the employee discount. So she gets the job, she gets the employee discount. That's in the age of like paper checks. And so, she would cash out her check for product, every single day. And then one day I realized that Fleet Feet was more than just Fleet Feet Carbo. There was, 40 of these stores across the country, and their corporate headquarters was based in North Carolina. And I thought, wow, like I really want to go somewhere where I believe in sort of like living a healthy and active lifestyle. I enjoy running. And so to be able to turn my passion into a profession would just be an unbelievable opportunity. I think I interviewed for the company for a year. I mean, I would show up in a suit and tie or pleated pants, and they'd be in t-shirts and had just come from a run, and we'd kind of both look at each other. And at some point I just said, hey, I want to take a flyer. I want to go from Ernst Young, one of 80,000 to like one of six employees. And I don't think I've ever looked back. I mean, I have such pride of sort of like what the brand stands for, how it comes to life. But 21, 22 years ago, like I could have never envisioned myself in this role. I thought, oh, I'll do this for a year or two. But at some point, I just fell in love with the company and the brand, and just been fortunate to still be here today.
You mentioned your wife, Ivy, is spending all this money at the company that you would later become the CEO for, and she has more of the avid, runner background, running marathons, etc. How much did you back then, but specifically now in a leadership position, lean on her and her insights because she was your kind of ideal consumer that you were shooting for?
As long as she doesn't listen to this, I mean, marriage is a tough thing, right? You're always riding some highs and lows, but I mean, there's a lot of times where she'll have like her phone out and like she's surfing, our website or like our app, and she's like, I just want this, and then she's like rattles off three other retailers that do it better. She's like, I don't understand what you do all day. Like, why can't you make this change? Or, a lot of times I'm like, I just want to decompress. Like I've worked all day. I just want a moment to watch whatever, rom com is on the TV. Like I don't want to hear your complaints about sort of like whatever it is that we've done to upset you at fleetfeed.com. And so but usually she's right, and like I'll let it simmer for a day or two, and then I'll be like, I'll take it to Jason, who's our chief operating officer. I'm like, hey, like I was talking to Ivy, and here's her list of complaints. And so she has a special place in sort of like my own validation, but also at Fleet Feet as well. So
That's amazing. That's a fun story right there. What would you say are the biggest, technicalities and complexities of starting running shoe stores? Obviously, you didn't, found or create the original one. You're now in the CEO position, but I think a lot of people I hear in the running world have ideas for running shoe stores, and you go on runs or you're in a running club, and they make it sound so much easier than I ultimately know it is. So I want to hear from your own words. How difficult is it to open a store as you guys now have over 300 plus?
Oh, I think it's hard. I think it's really hard at every level because but life is a series of trade-offs, right? And so at some point you have ideals of like what I want the store to look like, to feel like the vibe of the store, how I want people to interact. Um, but I mean, not to sound too crass, but you also have to make money, in this. And so it's like that fine balance of like, how do you do these things that are unique and authentic, that create sort of like the community connection, but are also like profitable, and so that all sort of like shareholders, whether it's you personally, your employees, and the community, all sort of, and the vendors sort of like win. And that's not easy. I mean, I think that Fleet Feet has done that really well over time. Um, the piece that gives me the most, like, what kind of keeps me up at night is like, how do you continue to build sort of like that culture, and how do you do that as you scale, right? Like when you have one store, it's really easy. Then you add the second store and the third store, and then when you get to the 300th store, and like you can't visit every store, like how do you ensure that that same culture and look and feel, like that is really hard to pull off. And I think that's been sort of like our secret sauce is our employees. I mean, you can literally sit in our stores and buy the product from anywhere else. And so like, how do you create that connection, and do that at scale is really hard.
What would you say, presently is the biggest distinguishing factor that you feel like keeps the loyalist Fleet Feet, customers coming back to your store versus going online in the age of everything being easier, going and trying out a new running shoe store that seems flashy in their city?
I think even as much as you have sort of like AI and sort of like digital and all of these things, I think that people still want to have like a human connection. I think people still wanted to try on shoes, and to have different experiences. It's funny in my role, I hear all sorts of stories. Some it's like, oh, we failed in this one. Some are comical, and some just make you cry of just like of what an amazing story it was. But we had a customer that called. This was probably like 3 weeks ago. Called our um, store and said, "Hey, like," and I'll just use this up. Is the person who is working, there today? Like, I want to talk to them. And so, like, you're like, well, who helped you? And so it's like, oh, I'm describing it. Oh, that must have been Dominic. And so you're like, no, Dominic, he's like fitting the customer right now. But like, what can I do to help you? And she's like, and this is what came out of her mouth. And I think this sort of like best exemplifies it. She's like, well, I'm a Bears fan, and the Bears and the Vikings played, and the Bears won, and Dominic is a Vikings fan, and so like I just wanted to call and say like we won. And so like that is sort of like Fleet Feet. It's sort of like bridging that gap where like you actually can talk one on one, and you come into our stores, and whether you're chasing your first mile because you've never been able to run a mile nonstop, or a fast 5K, or maybe it's your first marathon, like we're there to support you in that journey, and help give you sort of like that tools and guidance, and to really be alongside of you and offer sort of like solutions. And so like I hear stories, of like the Bears and the Vikings at all different levels that uh, really just sort of say, "Ah, like I know we're winning." When people are calling to talk to us about like who won the NFL game, like we were definitely making that human connection. I think that's our people are sort of like the differentiator.
Well, for the record, you got the conference right, but I'm actually a Packers fan. And we tied the Cowboys last night, so a sore subject this morning.
41,
But that's a
41.
I know, crazy stuff. I don't understand a different topic, but I don't understand why we're having ties in a professional sports league. But another subject for another time.
Yeah.
One thing I did really want to bring up to you, I do work with a lot of the brands, almost all of them, and you'll go to events and you'll talk to each of the area reps and establishing connection, getting to know them better. I always ask, how they got in that role or in the industry or their background in the sport. Most had some sort of background running in high school or college, but it's an odd amount. And I don't have a statistical number for you off the top of my head, but a significant amount were either managers at a Fleet Feet store or worked there in a very small capacity and then kind of worked their way into the brands or whatnot. And I hear this story all the time when I go on trips and events. Joey, how much pride do you take in the fact that you set a lot of people up for their dream job and they start at Fleet Feet?
No, I think you just said it. So I'm just going to take that, and we'll use that as our marketing script. I think that I would 100% agree. I mean, if you want to come and have a career in the running space, like there's no greater place to start than at Fleet Feet. And I would love if you stayed at Fleet Feet for the rest of your life. And like, there's lots of opportunities in stories. But you think of like Robin Green, who is leading Hoka. I mean, she's a long time and tenured employee out in California at Fleet Feet. Dan Shade, who's running U.S. sales at On now. Like, I mean, he got his start at Fleet Feet in California as well. I mean, we have put more people into the industry in running than anybody else by like a magnitude of a lot. And so I think if you want to come, hopefully you stay at Fleet Feet, but if you want to be in the industry, there's no better way to sort of like cut your teeth than working with us.
In relation to having, 300 plus stores, you mentioned some of the different locations, some of the different people who have worked there. If you have 300 of anything, there are going to be, stores that are doing it better, stores that are doing it worse. I'm not calling anyone out here. I know no information of the sort either which way, but I am curious in a leadership position, how do you, one, talk to that amount and that volume of store owners? And two, how do you, in the background, I'm curious to hear any lessons or principles you have that you take some of the top performing stores or cultures or whatever it might be and implement it into some of the stores or people that are struggling to bring them up to ultimately the expectation of standard for excellence you have.
I'd love to travel and visit stores. I mean, like that's where all the action, like that's where you learn. Uh, I guess it was last summer. I was celebrating my 20th year anniversary at Fleet Feet, and so my wife and I were running early one morning. She's going to get a sabbatical from her work, and I was like, "Well, I can't go to Europe. I'm running a company, so like you can either go by yourself." And she's like, "What if we do a van trip?" And so last summer I started in LA. And for 7 weeks in a Sprinter van, drove across the country from LA to North Carolina, all the way up to Chicago, Seattle, and then back down to LA, visiting stores. And so I set foot in over 50 stores, met with 150 store teams. I met vendors along the way. And, for me, like it was one of the I don't know, like it filled my cup, at some level. It was also really exhausting, because I mean, it was pretty much every single day. I mean, I would start usually with a run from a store, have breakfast with the staff, drive, have lunch with the staff, and then dinner, and we do bowling. And like that just happened every day for almost 50 days. But like the amount of stories that you heard and sort of I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I think like there's nothing better than like being out there and being with sort of like the people who are on the front lines who are like bringing the store to life. So, I mean, I would use that as like one example, of like how do you stay connected, and you just hear incredible stories in the journey, and then every once in a while you'll come across one of my principles is a nugget that feedback is a gift, and so usually the higher up you go in an organization, people only want to tell you the good things, and like I don't want to hear the good things. Like I want to hear all the pain points. Like what are the things that I'm doing or our team is doing to make your life miserable? If you could snap your fingers you would change that. Like that's what I really want to hear, along the way. And every once in a while in my trip, somebody would just like let it rip, and I'd be like, oh, like this is so great, and I'd be able to have my notebook out, and I'd be writing, and then eventually I would be like texting people. I'm like, hey, do you realize that we do this? But like if you're not out there in the field visiting, you just don't hear those things as well. Like they're just not going to magically end up in your office or on your four walls. So
I've heard this, and I'm sure it differs depending on organization to organization, but I've heard that CEO or leadership level roles, people who are actually secure in the role, actually like it when people come to them with issues or problems or things that they could do better. I'm sure delivery of that helps and changes the perspective of the receiver. But what's your general take on that? And if you're listening and you're a Fleet Feet employee, don't start blowing up Joey's phone with complaints because you think he'll like you more. But my point is, do you think there's value and benefit from when you get to a certain level of leadership, like you said, people just want to tell you all the good things. Do you personally value, and do you think other CEOs value employees coming to them and saying, "Hey, I think you can be doing this better," or, "Hey, I think we can be doing this, part better"?
Oh, 100%. Like I would hope that anybody would say like yes. And if there is an employee that's listening, you by all means, blow up my phone or my email. Like I would love to know like what those things are. I mean, I do think that at some point, I mean, just as an athlete, right? You go out and you train and you want to get better each and every day. And so I think that when you hear those things of like, oh, like this is causing sort of like the customer interaction not to be as great, anybody who doesn't want to hear that, like they shouldn't be in the role, And so, like, I value sort of like that feedback, and really, you want it at every level in the organization, whether it's somebody in the distribution center being like, "Hey, like these are the pain points that we can't get the product out faster," or it's at the retail floor level, meaning, "Hey, like I have to click this button 10 times to be able to take somebody's like credit card. If I could push one button, I could save all of this time or this experience." And so I think for us, like we've listened to our employees, and our franchise owners, and you're always trying to like evolve over time, and ultimately, hopefully, have a better customer experience. I mean, that should be the end goal with sort of like the evolution and change.
Anyone who's listening who is a high level high school runner can relate to this feeling because I had it back in the day. The dream job is a running shoe store salesman because you get to be around runners, you get to try on shoes, you might get a nice employee discount, and it's way better than taking orders at a Chick-fil-A or whatever high school kids do these days, being on your feet, mowing lawns. Um, for you, what's your perspective on that? I'm sure many of your stores, specifically over the summers, are filled with high school competitive runners. How cool is that to you in that kind of subset of a running store, store culture?
Well, I think it's really important to us. I think that we want to emulate our customers, right? And so you want to have people at every age, and sort of like every level of sort of like diversity. Um, I think for me, like having sort of like young people, it's like the energy and the excitement, right? And so like at some point, excitement builds excitement, and so the summertime is our busiest time of year, and so to have those people come into our shops is refreshing, at every level. Um,
For you, what's the core key motto or principles that guide Fleet Feet in your decisions within the company? And I'm also curious to hear about, I'm sure 20 years ago, you've kind of accomplished all the goals I would guess that you set out within the company. You guys, I'm sure, are bigger than you could have ever possibly imagined. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do you continue to grow and scale despite probably achieving success that you guys never thought was possible?
when I started at Fleet Feet, we had two simple rules. So you had to take your trash out every day because we could not afford a cleaning service at every level. And the second rule was like you had to answer the phone by the second ring because we wanted a high level of a service and an experience from sort of like our corporate team. And so I think like those same sort of like guiding principles of like no matter how big you get, like you still want to be humble, right? I mean, um, past success does not equal future success. And so, I mean, you have to get up every day and like work at it. I think that we're bigger than I could have ever envisioned, but like we're not even close to now what I see as sort of like our future. I mean, I think that we could easily have 400 stores here in the U.S. I dream of like one day being international, and so I think that we have a long road ahead of us. And for us, we're fortunate in that we get to wake up every day and we get to dream of like what we want to be, when we're older. And so like while we're celebrating 50 years in business, like we approach it of like how do we build a 100-year brand, and today is day one. And so like whatever happened the first 49 years doesn't matter, today is day one. And so like what do we want to be 100 years from now? And I think that long-term mentality, but also like that hunger, that drive to want to be scrappy, to be entrepreneurial, and to win and to compete, I think fuels a lot of our team at every level.
The 100-year vision, do you personally find it hard to build things or goals that are long past your time here on Earth? Because I could see me and my selfishness, even with this podcast, turning into a, larger company, creating products, whatever. And my selfishness, I could think, well, I just want it to be successful up until the point I die. And then, I won't know what goes on. So it doesn't really matter. You're talking 100-year goals. Your kids won't even be on this earth at that point too. What's behind that desire to truly, in your words, phrasing it another way, create something bigger than yourself that you'll never even know about.
Yeah, well, I think you said this early on. You're like, "Hey, Joey, you're not the founder," and so that's true. I'm not the founder, at any level, and so I've always approached sort of like the business almost like we're a relay team, and so at some point, Sally ran the first leg, and she handed the baton off to Tom, and then Tom ran a leg, and eventually, like I am now holding the baton, and so like I'm gonna run my leg as hard and fast as I can, and then I'm going to hand the baton off to the next person who's going to take over. And I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it because of like what we're building, for our communities that we support, and like they should be the ultimate sort of like winners from that perspective. So I guess like that's how I would think about it. Of like, hey, I'm only here for a short amount of time. I want to go as hard as I can, as fast as I can, in the end, like when I hand that baton off, like I want to be proud that like I left it all out there, and then I want to cheer on the next person who's going to run and hopefully make it better than where I did. So,
As you said, not the founder, but I do think, executive level positions, specifically the CEO leadership, there is a sense of ownership, whether you have it or not, of like, I run the ship, I lead this company. How much of that do you feel where, yeah, you didn't, found it 50 plus years ago, but, you're at the helm today, and whether Fleet Feet's successful or, fails, a lot of it does come back to that high level person, which is you. How important, whether it's a coach, a store manager, you at the CEO level position, does ownership matter?
I think ownership and leadership matter, a lot. I will often tell the story to new leaders, in our company of so I've worked for the brand for 2 decades now. I became CEO in 2017, and so I guess I worked for the brand for like 13 years before becoming CEO. Did just about everything in the organization. Thought I knew everything, and so became CEO, and I instantly regretted it, and like I would just spend days in bed and like I would just pull the covers back over my head and be like, I do not want to go to work today. Like I cannot face the people. Like I don't know why I agreed to become CEO. Like I just can't do this job. And so that probably took the better part of 2 or 3 years before I became comfortable, of being sort of like the CEO, because I was just used to, hey, well, we need to make a decision. Like, here's my recommendation. Do you want to do it? Do you not? And like, I wasn't like the final sort of like the decision maker. And so like, I think that was hard. And I think a lot of people experience that at every level. Like when you kind of take on something new, you're like, wow, like, am I too far over sort of like my skis? And like, how do I get myself, into that? I'm sure like, in 2020, when you started the podcast, like you did the first one and then maybe it's like the second one, you're like, I don't know where I am here, and so leading is hard, at every level. But it just takes grit and determination. And that's why we love to hire athletes, at Fleet Feet, because like at some point you may fail, and like failure is okay. We want to embrace that failure. I mean, we need to like learn from our mistakes and like get up and keep moving forward.
I love it. Such good, rich wisdom there. I don't know what you were talking about before we started the podcast. I'll expose you a little bit. You're like, I don't know, what I have to say or if it's valuable, but this one is packed with wisdom. And I feel like from a leadership executive position, even for me, I manage 5 contractors, so totally different level, but there's a lot of rich principles in here. So I'm personally getting a lot of value, and I greatly appreciate it. I want to dive deeper into the feeling of pulling the covers over your head. What do you think was behind that and those feelings, and what do you think it took to actually overcome them? I know you spoke to that a little bit, but diving deeper into that specific aspect.
I just say self doubt, and yeah, just self doubt. Like, hey, I can't do this. Like, I am just not equipped to do it. I just doubted, myself at every level, and um, I think the light bulb moment was you think, oh well, like you're the CEO, like you need to have every answer, or you're this mythical person, and like that's about as far from the truth as it gets. And so for me, the light bulb moments were, hey, like how do I ensure that like I'm hiring great people and surrounding myself by great people? How do I ensure that I go into a meeting and I'm like listening? I don't need to have the answer and tell people what to do, but I need to be sort of like the great listener. I think the Achilles heel for a lot of leaders is like they want to have all the answers or they want to speak first. It's almost like I want to be the third person who speaks. Like I want to hear what the first person said. Then I want to see, well, what is the second person who speaks? Are they for or against it? And then I want to weigh in at the moment of the third, because I've kind of assessed sort of like the situation. I think just being comfortable, from that standpoint, it just takes time. It takes repetition. You don't get to be that overnight. And I mean, the adage, right? I mean, you experience this to some degree. It's lonely at the top, right? When you're sort of like the final decision maker, and everybody is counting on you. I mean, one of my goals and one of the things that drives me is I want to create a brand that provides meaningful employment to individuals, right? I want to employ as many people as possible, and provide sort of like special opportunities for the people who work for us. And so when you're thinking of like, well, how is this decision going to impact our ability to provide meaningful employment? I mean, there's a lot of weight that comes along with those decisions. Um, but over time, I've been fortunate. I mean, we've hired just incredible people who are much brighter than me, and so like they elevate me, and so then I just get to be the face, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting that you see, and sort of like when people come into our stores, they get to experience.
So many different questions I could ask you. I do want to ask you because I don't want to miss it. Foot Locker Nationals, turning into Brooks Cross Country Championships. You know the terminology, so I won't steal it from you because I don't want to say something wrong. But what was behind that move? I grew up watching the Foot Locker meet. The news that it ended. I'd been intimately involved with Hoka over the past 2 years on the marketing side, creating pieces of content for them. I hear it got canceled. I was crushed. That fifth grader watching that meet on YouTube was crushed in me. And I was thrilled to see it, brought back in this capacity because I think a lot of people thought, well, it might come back, but it might be 2 years or 3 years or whatever. Take me behind the scenes in the CEO seat. What did it take to bring it back to life and specifically in partnership with Brooks?
I think life is sometimes being at the right moment, at the right place, in the right time, and just having your ears open. I mean, I can't speak to what happened in terms of like why they decided not to move forward, but once like that was more or less public knowledge that they were not going to move forward, I just think it's bad for the sport, right? I mean, I think that kudos to Nike. I mean, what Nike has done with NXN, NXR is just incredible. But like, I also think that like there needs to be sort of like a counterbalance, and like I think Foot Locker to be that individual like championship and to give kids all across the country, in the different regions, like the ability to race in a championship style race. But then like Balboa Park, I mean, like the history and heritage, like you just don't want to lose that at any level. And so um, there were several different groups who were vying to sort of like bring it back. And as you said, but it could be 2 or 3 years later. I stumbled across a group of people, Julia Stamps, who is a former winner who runs Aventus, Jesse Williams from Sound Runner, and Jorge Torres, former, athlete in the event, gifted runner, race director. I got connected with them. I listened to them like on a call like this, a Zoom call for like 30 minutes. And like, I just left the call thinking, I want to support you in any way possible. Like, I don't know what it looks like, but like, I'm all in, with this group. And I mean, kudos to Brooks, for coming in. I mean, like they're the title sponsor and, supporting this and allowing this to come to life. But I mean, I will also say, I mean, Julia, Jesse, and Jorge deserve a lot of sort of like the credit for sort of like wrangling all the pieces. And so it was a wild 7 or so days. I mean, you're trying to come to the point of like, okay, well, like, can you get the permits? What's the plan going to be? Like, are the race directors on board? And you don't want to just recreate the race as is. I mean, like there's history and heritage, but it's also like, well, how do you make it new and better? And so one of the ideas that was tossed out there and is now out is the golden tickets. And so like, how do you go from last year was like 40, right? Boys, 40 girls. How do you go to 50? And how do you have these 10 golden tickets for each sort of like gender and get sort of like the best athletes? And I can say that I'm just more excited about the golden tickets almost than the race in and of itself. Like I just think that once these golden tickets start coming out and like the stories and the activations, like I think it's going to be pretty incredible. So races on this year. I mean, I think if you wait a year, you just lose the momentum, and so you got to capitalize. And so like when I talk about kudos to these individuals, I mean like for being able to pull it off on such a short time frame, I think it's pretty incredible. And like we're just here to support them in any way possible.
So exciting. So excited to see it all go down. It's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, I think I felt the same way with the year off. It's just people lose interest really fast because of how dopaminergic, if that's even a word, we are with our phones and TikTok and scrolling. And you lose a year of momentum. And I'm really excited to see this event continue. And I think the cool thing with Foot Locker itself is it's always stayed the same core principles, but there's been a little variance every few years. Like it was East Bay one year, and then Champs, and then back to Foot Locker, and it used to be Kinney, and
Yeah.
but it's always been at Balboa, and yeah, that's just where no hate to Nike, but I feel like Foot Locker is the historic meet that I can talk to Dina Castor, and she won it, but then I can talk to Drew Griffith, who's now at Notre Dame, and he won it. And there's just all sorts of history left and right. So thank you for being a big part in bringing it back, because I'm super excited just as a fan of the sport to see
So
that
you
event
coming out?
continue.
Are you going to come
Hope
out
so.
December
Hope
14th?
so. I hope so. Yeah, I came out the last 2 years and I've never experienced anything like it in terms
Yeah.
of the atmosphere of 40 and 40, and each person there had a different story to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think that was really special. I'll send you after this, but we made kind of like a 10-minute documentary on last year's edition. And that, I think, out of any piece of like event content I've ever made, was my favorite, because I
Okay.
feel like in 10 minutes, it actually showcased the story of Foot Locker
Yeah.
better than anything I had seen before. So, wrapping this one up, I do want to ask you leadership principles for leaders out there, whether it's coaches, store managers, CEOs, people like me trying to scale things. What are the key principles that you think people can apply directly into their teams or organizations that will help take them to the next level?
Oh, I don't know. I could go so many different directions. It probably depends on the day you ask me. If I'll go with this one. One of the sayings I like to use at Fleet Feet is fail fast, fail forward. Hopefully, you fail frugally along the way. I mean, we live in an age right now where you think of like AI and sort of like the pace of sort of like change, or even like the evolution of the experience. I mean, when people go and they shop at Whole Foods or Amazon, like they're judging us, right? And so like, how do we continue to elevate our experience? Innovation happens through failure, and so you have to embrace that failure, and you have to sort of like know, well, like what's like a Pandora box. Like if I make this decision, like there's no way out. Versus like, oh, like this is just like a two-way door. I can go in, and I can go out. And so like I think like the quicker you can kind of decide sort of like what's like a two-way versus like a one-way sort of like decision, and empower your teams to be able to have that nimbleness to fail and to really like embrace failure. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, like I don't want to fail, right? And so like my son is running, he's a freshman, and so he's running cross country. And so at the last meet, it was like a one-on-one meet. And I'm like, you should just go out and just gun it and just see how long you can last. And at some point, like you're gonna just burn out and die, and that's okay. Like but at some point, it's about like pushing, and you're gonna learn. Okay, well, like I hit the red line here, and so if I back off, then I can hit my PR like next time. And so I think embracing failure more than anything else would be how I would lean to.
I want to ask you another question in regards to Fleet Feet. I Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty young, so I haven't been around the block as long, so I don't know things sometimes. But from my understanding, you guys have kind of pioneered the model of running shoe stores across the US. You guys seem to be that one of one. You can go to any city across the US and they'll probably have a running shoe store, but you ask, oh, how many others do you have? And you might hear, this is the only one, or you might hear, we have four others. You guys are the one that I feel like is dominant, again, regardless of where you go in the US. how unique of a position do you guys feel like you're in, specifically in relation to the running boom, where you're kind of at the core of creating something that's never been done before? And you go to any major city across the US, and we're seeing more run clubs pop up than ever before. I think high school participation is going up. And it's just this really cool mix of everything coming together. How do you feel in regards to those subjects?
I think it's an exciting time to be sort of like in this space. Whether this is a true stat or not, I'm gonna say it was. I was in a meeting with one of our large vendors, and they had done some consumer insights. And so, since January 1st, 2020, so I'm not going to use COVID. I'll use January 1st, 2020. Since that moment in time, like 30% of the people who are running in the U.S. today, like they started, January 1st, 2020 and beyond. And so, if you think about that, like many of those people started running in COVID when they had masks or they were like social distanced, or it's just such a like a younger group of individuals who are more motivated by like style and health and wellness than maybe even chasing sort of like a PR. And so I think it's an exciting moment in time, right? Because like they don't even know what running stores are. Like they've never had a coach, or maybe they've never even sort of like run a race. And so um, I just think to be able to come alongside this group of individuals who is looking for guidance, but like they're searching it out on like the stat was like 63% of them are learning their running from TikTok. And like, I don't know, TikTok wasn't around when I started at Fleet Feet. I mean, I was printing out Google Maps, trying to figure out where I was driving to, and I had like pages of like sheets of paper anytime I visited a city. And so like now to be able to like open up TikTok and know like where the best places to run is, or like what the level of like the latest and greatest running shoe, I think that creates opportunities for us to come alongside of this group of individuals and like be able to like intersect a digital community with a physical community and like what that looks like, but to also have this scale where, hey, if you're going to Miami, come show up at one of our Miami run clubs. If you're, in Chicago for the Chicago Marathon, like we've got all sorts of events and activations, or New York City, or maybe you're just in Toledo, Ohio, where we open up a Fleet Feet store. And so like you can find us, at every corner. And so scale gives you that. But I just think at this moment in time where there's just so much energy and buzz about like, how do I lead a more healthy and active lifestyle? I think that's incredible, and we should all be excited about that.
You don't have to answer this question. And if I was advising you from a PR perspective, I would say don't answer this question. But I'm sure a question you get asked all the time. People hear you run a running shoe store or you have influence in this space, because I get asked this question every day.
What's
What's
your
your
favorite
favorite
running
running
shoe?
shoe?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
question. Everybody wants to know what's your favorite running shoe. It's just like a no-win situation. I used to say like, well, I would never tell my kids who my favorite kid was. But then I was somewhere and they were like, oh no, I rank my kids every day. And every day, like my kids know, know what they are. And so I was like, huh, that's an interesting idea. So I've actually started ranking my kids. I've been doing it for about a month now. So like at the end of the day, I've got three kids. They're all like close in age. So 16, 14, and 12. I'm like, okay, here's where you are. Do you want to be number one tomorrow? This is what you got to do. And so um, I rarely answer the question, Dominique, it's a no-win situation, but there's just so many great shoes out there. I probably run in a different shoe every 2 weeks. And so, like, you think of, I usually run 6 days a week. So I'm running 12 shoes before I repeat. Um, Man, there's just so many great shoes. I'll actually give you three. So, Mizuno, like, I love the Zen. Like, there's just something about, I don't like the upper of the Zen. So maybe if I sort of like course correct when Mizuno's listening to this, like, I love part of the shoe. If you can fix the upper to be a little more easier for my foot to get into, but like, I put that shoe on and like, I just feel great. The Nova Blast from Asics is incredible. We've started to do a little bit more with Adidas, the Evo. Like if you just want to feel fast, I mean, like I could go on. Like there's so many great shoes that are out there that you just got to find like what fits your foot the best, and then go for it. But and buy more than one. Maybe if you do anything, having more than one so you uh, can sort of like experience different things is always a good play. Easier said than done, I realize.
Yeah, the running shoe world is so big. I have not tried any of the shoes you mentioned. which is crazy to me. So, and I've got probably 90 plus pairs in my closet, which is insane. Question
That's
for
why you
you.
need
Do
to
you,
come work a shift. You should come work a shift in Fleet Feet in Columbus, and then you can go in the back room. You can try them
try
on
them
in
all
between
out?
sort of like the days. I don't know. I mean, well, I think that's the joy, right? I mean, when people come into our stores, I mean, every foot is different, you know. And so, I mean, we have the scanner. You're scanning your feet. We can start to recommend shoes. I mean, 20% of the people, like one of their feet is at least a half size difference, right? And so, like the last, which is sort of like the mold that shoes are shaped on, are all different. I don't know. I highly recommend one, just trying on different and feeling like which one is best for you. I mean, they're all different and they all feel different. So
Yeah, there's no bigger mistake, in my opinion, than seeing an influencer with a shoe on social media and going online and buying it without trying it in person first. And that's why when people say, what's the best shoe, which is just, as you say, a non-win situation, even in private for me, I say, go to your local running shoe store, get fitted, and try on a bunch of shoes, and then come up with a,
yeah, let's
educated
do that
guess
answer.
because,
Let's do
yeah.
that answer. Then whatever I said. But yes,
Do you,
I
do
think
you,
but
do you have
there's
a
just so
big
many great
closet?
shoes right now. So
Yeah,
yeah.
how big's the closet? How many shoes are you owning at this moment in time?
When you said you had 90 pair, I was trying to do the math in my head. I do recycle mine on a
Okay.
fairly regular basis. I don't know. I probably have, well, yeah, I have more than you want to know. So I'll just leave it at that. But you can't have too many. If so we're getting ready to move offices, otherwise, like there would be art and stuff. But I'm moving somewhere else. But like it was like almost stacked to the ceiling with shoes
Wow.
the other day, and so like I don't know. There's just well, this morning, um, Jogology is a relatively like new sock brand. One of my people, Luke Rowe, who used to work at Fleet Feet years ago, went out and started this sock brand, Jogology. And so he'd sent me some pair of socks. And so I just put on a brand new pair of socks today. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's nothing better than a fresh new pair of socks, right? I mean, it's that way with shoes. I mean, like if you're into running, like just having gear is fun. I don't know. Like it's just, yeah.
It is super fun. I was gonna ask you one other question about, oh, running shoes. Have you guys ever talked about, as a company, creating a product, whether it's a shoe or something else, because you have so many stores? Have you ever thought about, or is that just an immediate no because it's a conflict of interest with other companies?
I think it's hard. There's a lot of people who are creating running shoes at this moment in time. I think for us, I would hope we could be the authenticator or sort of like the tastemaker. I mean, we are a brand of brands. Like we don't create, product from that standpoint. And so, like when you come to us, like you're going to get an authentic point of view as to like what's the best shoe for you. And there's no, oh, well, like this is your private label shoe, and like that's why you're pushing it. I mean, at some point, I think that's a powerful position for us to be in. I'm not saying that we'd always be in that. I mean, I think yes, maybe we would create something over time, but I don't know. I feel like we're in a great space right now, and like there's just so much great product, from every brand across the board. So
I love it. Joey, final question for you. The question I ask every guest on every single podcast. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
I have a wood fire pizza oven, so I'm gonna let him create his own. So you will have all the different toppings, and then like I will do the honor of like cooking it. He can yell at me when it's overcooked or undercooked, and then we can sit around the solo stove and talk. But I would go with sort of like a wood fire pizza, but he's gonna build it himself, and I will maybe I'll judge him as to like which toppings to put on. We can kind of balance out each other.
Psychological war. I love it. Flipping
Yeah.
the table on him. Well, Joey, thank you so much for your time. I greatly valued and appreciated it, and was so fun to sit down with someone who's leading such an amazing company, and some company that has directly had an impact on me and my upbringing in the sport. And it's been so cool to follow your career and your success. And how about this? We'll run it back on the podcast in San Diego this December,
Oh,
and,
I'm
and pick it up
excited.
for round two.
You're. Let's go. Yeah, so I'm in. Let's do it. San Diego, December 14th. So,
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Joe.
all right. Thank you, Dominic.